Hi, I'm Carol Ann Weaver from Body and Soul Companion, and we are on week 24, day 5 of the spiritual exercises of Ignatius. And today we are looking at the feeding of the 5,000. If you have my old manual, we did John 6 and we did 37 verses. Well, Ignatius recommended Matthew 14, and I'm not sure why I put John 6. I think it's because Pray As You Go had a wonderful meditation in John. So in my manual, my current manual, it's in the footnote too. So you can do an alternate one with Pray As You Go. They've been doing it for years. I have not been doing imaginative contemplation. Well, I guess I've been doing it since the 80s, but I haven't been leading people through them until like the last 5 years. So I'm a newbie at leading through. And if you were here yesterday, you probably saw I kind of stumbled a lot on sending out the apostles. Ooh, look at the light just changed. But this is a shorter passage than the John 6 one. But this is one of the few things that Jesus did where it's in all 4 Gospels. So it's very important to take a note. This is an important one, feeding the 5,000. So I invite you to close your eyes, to take a deep breath, and in and out, relaxing your body with each breath. Psalm 46:10 says, "Let go, relax, and know that I am God." God is here with us right now, and He wants you to come into His presence and to let go and relax. To let go physically and to let go mentally of any person, situation that's burdening you. To let go. Just as you let go of air, let go and give your burdens, situations, people, anxieties, fears, worries, give them over into the loving hands of God. And as you fix your gaze on God, know that He's looking upon you with love and wants you to receive His loving gaze. Lord, we pray that more of our day would be committed to your service and praise. And we seek the grace, Jesus, to see you more clearly, love you more dearly, and follow you more nearly as we enter into this scene where you fed the 5,000. The heart of the second week is contemplation of the gospel stories. We enter into them through a kind of imaginative prayer in which we actually enter into the gospel scene and become part of it. We experience the event with Jesus and the disciples. We are the people healed and forgiven. We are the people fed. We are the disciples feeding people. Praying in this way engages us in the life of Jesus. So I invite you with all your senses to come into God's presence as I read, come into the scene as I read Matthew 14, 13 through 21. Now, when Jesus heard it, he withdrew from there in a boat to a lonely place by himself. And what he had just heard is that John the Baptist had been beheaded. And when the multitudes heard of this, they followed him on foot from the cities. And when he went ashore, he saw a great multitude and felt compassion for them and healed their sick. And when it was evening, the disciples came to him, saying, "The place is desolate, and the time is already past. So send the multitudes away, that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves." But Jesus said to them, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." And they said to him, "We have only 5 loaves and 2 fish." And those were supplied by a little lad, a little boy. And he said, "Bring them here to me." And ordering the multitudes to recline on the grass, he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up toward heaven, he blessed the food, and breaking the loaves, he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave to the multitudes. And they all ate and were satisfied. And they picked up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 full baskets. And there were about 5,000 men who ate, aside from the women and children. So let's just sit with that reading for a bit. So as we set the scene, we know that John the Baptist has just been beheaded. And Jesus, hearing that, withdraws to a deserted place after learning of the death of John. And the crowds follow him there. So with that, who are you in this story? Are you one of the disciples or someone in the crowd? So I want you to see in your mind's eye the sea of Galilee. And he's withdrawn from Galilee to Bethsaida. What do you see? What do you hear? There's a large crowd. What do you smell? Look at the crowds. How do you feel seeing all the crowds? What's the weather like? Feel the temperature on your skin. and see Jesus having compassion. What does he look like having compassion for all those multitudes? And see him healing the sick. And what are you hearing from people in the crowd as he's healing the sick? And imagine you've been there for a lot of the day, and then the sun sets, so it becomes dark all around. And here are the disciples, or maybe you're one of the disciples, saying to Jesus, "The place is desolate and the time is already past. Send the multitudes away that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves." And then hear Jesus say, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." Now, what's your reaction if you're one of the disciples? Imagine feeding 5,000 people and the women and children. It's a lot more than 5,000. That would be very expensive. What are you thinking? How do you feel about that? And then you respond, what's the look on your face, or what's the look on the disciples' face when they say, "We have here only 5 loaves and 2 fish," because the little lad has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. And you think, impossible to feed that many people. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? And then you hear Jesus say, "Bring those 5 barley loaves and 2 fish and bring them to me." So you bring them, you see the disciples bring them, or maybe even the little boy brings the 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. Imagine that in your mind's eye. And then hear the disciples say to everyone, "Recline on the grass." So all those people, you see them reclining on the grass. See them all go from standing to reclining. What do you hear from the crowd? What is the murmur from the crowd? And then see Jesus lift up those 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and see him look upward toward heaven, blessing the food, breaking the loaves, and see him giving those loaves to the disciples. And then see the disciples giving them to all the people reclining all over by the seashore. Imagine that. And then imagining eating the bread and eating the fish. What does it taste like? Imagine not eating all day because you've just been watching the miracles of Jesus healing people all day. What does it feel like to eat the bread and eat the fish? And not just a little bread, but enough to satisfy. What does that food feel like in your stomach after being very hungry? What's the murmur in the crowd as people eat to their fill? And then see the disciples, or maybe you're one of the disciples, pick up all the broken pieces and put them in 12 baskets, and see those baskets, those 12 baskets filled to overflowing with the fish bones, mostly fish bones. And then look around you at the 5,000 men and women, and plus the women and children. Just look over the mass of people and feel in your own stomach how full and satisfied you feel. Just imagine being a Jew in Jesus' time. And hearken back to the history, your own history, where you've heard about the miraculous feeding of the Israelites in the desert. And know that the Messiah, the chosen one, was expected to repeat this miracle. And make that connection in your own mind. Because he took the bread, he broke it. He took, he blessed, he broke, and he gave. And I want you to remember that. He took, he blessed, he broke, and he gave. Because we're going to see that later on in our time with Jesus. So I want you, you're full, you're satisfied. I want you to look at Jesus. And have him look at you. And what's the expression on his face? What does he want you to learn? You've just seen this miracle performed. And Jesus, hear him ask, would you feed the crowds in your own life? And what are your 5 loaves and 2 fishes? 2 fishes, 2 fish. What are your 5 loaves and 2 fish? In the last story, he said, freely you have received, freely give. What are those 5 loaves and 2 fish you have received? And he's asking you to feed the crowds in your own life. Crowds. How have a conversation with Jesus about that. And then the next one, the next question Jesus asks you is, what are you hungry for? And how are you fed? Jesus is asking you, how are you fed in this life? And then try to remember, we did this a lot in the first 2 weeks of the exercises. I want you to remember a time where you were given unexpected abundance coming out of scarcity. And then ask God what He wants you to know and impress on your mind from that. So again, the questions. If Jesus were to ask you, feed the crowds in your life, what would your 5 loaves and 2 fish be? What are you hungry for? How does Jesus feed you? How are you fed? And think back that joy memory, a joyful memory where you witness unexpected abundance coming out of scarcity. Where was God in that experience? I invite you to just talk to Jesus about those 3 questions, and I'll put them in the description, those questions. And just what came in my mind, I'll just share with you just an example of that last question. Have you witnessed unexpected abundance coming out of scarcity? My husband and I, we had 1 child and we had a truck, very old truck. So the 3 of us would fit in the front of that truck. And our 1 child, and we were expecting our 2nd child. And we had no money. My husband was in graduate school at the time. And I remember walking and taking a walk, and God just kept on bringing all these suburban cars by me. And I just felt like we needed a bigger car. I don't know if I mentioned that. With a 2nd child, we were all not going to be able to fit in the cab of a truck. And we had no money to buy a new car. So I kept on seeing all these Suburbans one day on my walk. And I said, God, would you provide a Suburban for us? And within a short amount of time, that was like 29 years ago. So it was a long time. So I can't remember what the length of time was between when I prayed that. We did get this idea, well, George's dad has an extra car, a Subaru. And we thought, well, that would have a back seat to it. And he wasn't using the Subaru very much. And so we said, maybe we can borrow it from him until we can save enough money for a car. And what ended up happening is George, my husband, asked his dad, said, do you think we could borrow your Subaru when Paul comes, the baby comes, until we can get a car? And he's like, why don't I just give you my Suburban? That's a bigger car. You'll need a bigger car than a Subaru. I'll just drive this Subaru. I'll give you my Suburban. And he wasn't traveling as much. He needed the Suburban because he traveled a lot, and so he would sleep in the back of the Suburban, but he wasn't traveling back and forth where he needed it anymore. And he needed actually a better car for gas mileage, so he's going to use a Subaru more. And so we got a Suburban, but seriously, I had been praying for a Suburban because I felt like God put it on my heart. And I have to tell you, that Suburban, it had a bench seat, and we had that Suburban and we drove it until it was 200,000 miles, and those kids grew and their friends grew, and we could take 9, because it had a back seat you could put in the Suburban, so we could take 9 people in that Suburban, and it just brought us so much joy, to bring, just ministry joy, to bring people in that Suburban going places and doing things. So the title, or just what God wanted to impress upon my heart, is that I do provide. God is a provider. Jesus provides. So I will put those questions in the description, and those questions again are from Imagine You Walked with Jesus. It's a book. All the imaginative contemplation I do by myself, but I like some of the questions at the end that they have. And you can journal about those if you'd like. So have a wonderful day and be blessed.